So I talked a little bit about this last week, just because SAG-AFTRA had just started their strike. Obviously, the WGA strike has been going on for weeks at this point. But the actors are now getting into it, which means even productions that were already written and they were filming, those shut down. So we're really going to start seeing in the next several months, we're going to start feeling the effects of the shutdown. And for those of you who don't remember the 2007 to 2008 writers' strike, Hollywood's response was to make a whole bunch of trash reality TV, because even though reality TV still relies on writers, they don't have to call them writers because it's ostensibly reality TV, so it's unscripted. If you know anything about how reality TV is created, like it's like wrestling, it's all fake. But that's something we've got to look forward to. Now, full solidarity with the striking workers. It's not their fault that Hollywood is going to be relying on crappy reality TV for the next year. That's the studios. And in particular, there was a story where like one of the studio execs had said that they're going to wait basically until October to come back to the negotiating table because they expect at that point writers are going to start losing their houses. And so they'll be a little bit more desperate. And this was said before the actors' strike, but they had to know the actors' strike was coming. Like, I'm pretty sure all the execs knew we're already dealing with one strike. They're going to add on to it. So they made that calculation also knowing that the actors were going to be striking. And I think our good friend Ron Perlman had some very interesting things to say about this.
Who said we're going to keep this thing going until people start losing their houses and their apartments. Listen to me, mother. There's a lot of ways to lose your house. Some of it is financial, some of it is karma, and some of it is just figuring out who the said that. And we know who said that, and where he lives. There's a lot of ways to lose your house. You wish that on people. You wish that families starve while you're making $27 million a year for creating nothing. Be careful, mother. Be really careful. Because that's the kind of that stirs up. Peace out.
Agreed. Peace out. With that being said, obviously this channel does not endorse any implications of violence. And I think Ron Perlman himself has said that this was not an attempt to incite violence, just to try and illustrate the realities of what it means to lose someone's home. And yeah, it's pretty disgusting for the studio execs to do that kind of a thing. Now, there's a couple of misconceptions that I was seeing going around. Some people have been wondering, should we stop going to see movies? Should we cancel our streaming services? And it is very important that you understand that SAG and the WJ are not calling for a consumer boycott at this time. In fact, the opposite. They want you to go see these movies. They want you to keep streaming because the more money that these things make for the studio, the more the writers and actors can say, this is the value that we are providing to you. If they do this strike and Hollywood starts losing a bunch of money, Hollywood's like, well, you guys weren't pulling us in money anyway, so why should we have to pay you? Or they could say, oh, well, you know, we just aren't making enough money to pay you. There's no boycott at this point, but there was one confusing thing going around, and it all ties to this page. This is the SAG-AFTRA's official website, FAQs for influencers. And in particular, this spot says, am I allowed to promote struck work on social media as a fan and not in a paid capacity? Influencers should refrain from posting on social media about any struck work, regardless of whether they are posting organically or in a paid capacity. A lot of people were very concerned about this line because it seems to go in direct contrast to what they're saying about how, yes, you should still go and see these things. Yes, you should still go and pay for streaming. But what a lot of people missed is that this is an FAQ for influencers who are SAG members. In fact, if you go all the way down to the bottom, it says, how does this apply to me if I'm a non-union influencer? Any non-member seeking future membership in SAG-AFTRA who performs covered work or services for a struck company during the strike will not be admitted into membership in SAG-AFTRA. So, what that means is, if you're a fan, and if you consider yourself an influencer, and as a streamer who reviews media, I would fall under that blanket of influencer. It means if you are being paid by one of the companies that are being struck against to promote that work, that is crossing the picket line. But if you're not a member of SAG, you can talk about any work that you like as much as you want. That's fine. Just don't take money from the studio to do it. Now, I know there are YouTube channels who, under the table, take deals from the studios to promote their works. I mean, if you've ever watched Red Letter Media's Nerd Crew, I think it's called, where it's like a parody of those kind of like pop culture nerd shows where they basically keep implying it's like, oh yeah, Disney's paying us to say all these things. And then they're like, wait, no, this is completely organic. Disney's not paying us. That stuff does go on YouTube. This is not one of those channels. This will never be one of those channels. Even if Paramount came up to me and said, hey, we want to pay you to promote Star Trek, I would not take that, because as much of a fan of Star Trek as I am not a fan of Paramount. And even though my love of Star Trek is going to, influence my critiques of it, like, I just have to be cognizant of that I'm always going to be more favorable to Star Trek than a comparable work in that wasn't Star Trek. Even knowing that, I'm still coming at this from an analysis of being a film critic, and getting paid to do that, even if there wasn't a strike, would go against that. So that is not me. I am not crossing any picket lines here. I am enjoying works from people, talented people who want people to see and enjoy their works, and want to be paid fairly for it. Speaking of, I saw this the other day, and I didn't actually look through the demands, but I thought we might actually just go through some of these demands ourselves. So SAG just released all the deal points and the AMPTP's response. Oh my fucking god. SAG-AFTRA negotiation status as of July 13th, 2023. So this is as of a week ago. The left column is what SAG-AFTRA proposes, and this is what the AMPTP, which I think is the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers. I think that's what that stands for. I could be wrong. I'll have to look that one up later. But economics and inflation and wage invasion. SAG is asking minimums: 11% general wage increase in year 1, 4% in year 2, and 4% in year 3. Without an inflation-adjusted year 1 wage increase, members will be working for lower real wages in 2023 than they earned in 2020, and would likely still be working for lower real wages even in 2026. AMPTP counters with 5% in year 1, 4% in year 2, 3.5% in year 3. I don't know if that's going to make up for, but they're saying without an inflation-adjusted year 1 wage increase, which they're not offering because they're asking for 11% and they're getting less than half of that. Sounds like they won't be making as much as they were 3 years ago. New media revenue sharing. Casts share in the revenue generated when their performances are exhibited on streaming platforms. This would allow casts to share in the success of high-performing shows. Rejected. They don't have a counteroffer. That's just rejected. And if you're an actor in Hollywood, you might get one role a year, and you'll have to be waiting tables or doing some other job for the rest of that. So residuals are vital to making sure that this industry can keep going. Because if your actors can't make enough to live in Hollywood or in the surrounding area, you're not going to have access to them. You need actors to be able to afford to work in the town that you're filming. And if they can only get one acting job a year, they need to make sure that that one acting job can keep them paid long after they do that job, because there's going to be months between jobs sometimes. And the Alliance is just rejecting it. Wage invasion due to advance payment of residuals. Limit the amount of a performer's salary that can be reduced due to the advance payment of residuals. Instead of disguising advance payment of residuals as a part of the performer's initial compensation, require transparency with a separate residual check that goes to the union, the same as all other residuals. And the Alliance counters with increase the protective threshold figures in the contract and match terms agreed to by Netflix in 2019, but refuse the union's request for transparency with a separate residual check. Per diem. Adjust for inflation the money that members receive to pay for meals and incidentals when traveling for work. Not increased since 2001? They have not increased their per diem in 22 years. Remedy the studio's systematic non-compliance with the contractual requirement that per diems be paid up front and not weeks later. And they say increase the amount due by far less than inflation, ignored the issue of actually making the payment on time. Yeah, Hollywood is actually really bad for paying people on time. I was hearing stories that it could take months for some people to get their checks, which is absurd. Schedule breaks. The parties have we've got an agreement here. Let's see what it is. The parties have tentatively agreed to conform to the minimum payments that performers must receive before their employers can invoke the various, quote, schedules under which members lose entitlements to additional payments such as weekly overtime. Schedule F. Increased minimum payments for performers working Schedule F, which was intended for star performers who have more negotiating power, but since the rates have not increased in decades, it now sometimes results in those performers earning less than Schedule C, which guarantees a minimum weekly rate and additional payments like weekly overtime. Proposed small increases that do not solve the problem, rejected the portion related to ensuring a minimum weekly rate for performers working Schedule F. So, on this first page, the only thing they've actually come to an agreement on is one thing. And I got 2 more screenshots from just this first tweet, and we've got 2 more tweets to go. Next up, for singers. Number 1, clarify the calculation of vocal contractor payments. Tentatively agreed to a whittled down version of the vocal contractor portion. Okay. 2, singers who also render dancing services should be paid an adjustment on top of their rate for singing. Offered 25% of the applicable dancer rate, but only for performance days, not rehearsals. Rehearsals are work, too, okay? If they're doing 2 jobs, they should be being paid for both jobs for all the days that they're working both of those jobs. Number 3, initiated a discussion surrounding production budgets that result in singer work going offshore and non-union. 3, indicated that they will continue budgeting practices that result in singer work going offshore and non-union. So they're not interested at all in not hiring out. 4, increased transparency and accuracy in reporting of singers' work, withdrew after their rejection, and it was rejected. For dancers, dancers should receive additional compensation when they are asked to sing or lip sync in addition to dancing on rehearsal and shoot days. And this is the same as we saw with the singers, countered with an additional 25% of the applicable singer rate, but only for performance days, not rehearsal days, and not for lip syncing. You still have to learn the song when you're lip syncing. Number 2, dancers should be paid the same for rehearsal days as they are for performance days. Rehearsal days are more strenuous and dangerous than performance days. This is absolutely true. On rehearsal days, you're going to be doing it a lot more. You're going to be doing it a lot more repetitively. You're still learning it and you're still coordinating. I have been a stage actor for many years, and yeah, rehearsals can be a lot more strenuous than a performance. And they say tentatively agreed to the rehearsal days proposal, which I assume means paid the same for rehearsal days. Okay, so that's good. It's good that they are tentatively agreeing to this proposal. But then the next 2 are rejected. Remove the discounted group rate for 9+ dancers. Offered to withdraw in exchange for other gains for dancers. Redefine principal dancer to ensure professional dancers are not hired for lower background rates. Offered to withdraw in exchange for other gains for dancers. So it sounds like these 2 were withdrawn in order to get the payment for the tentative agreement to be paid the same for rehearsals as for performances. Okay, and here we have a tentative agreement. Major role performers. The parties have tentatively agreed to extend the major role performer terms to high-budget SVOD series and all seasons of pay TV. Relocation allowance. Drop the ruse that television series regulars who travel to other states or countries for their work thereby become residents who are not entitled to reimbursement for housing and other expenses. Increase the relocation allowance to sufficient levels. Offered inadequate fixed stipends that bear no relationship to the actual cost of spending months away from home to work on television shows. Ban. Increase figures that govern when series regulars can freely bargain for work time. These figures have not changed since their inception in 1971. Countered with an inadequate increase that does not even come close to adjusting these figures for inflation. Really seems like they are just not working with them on almost any of these. Proposal for wardrobe. Increase the cleaning allowances to more accurately reflect the cost of dry cleaning when performers and background actors have to provide their own wardrobe. Offered inadequate increases that would force members to continue paying out of pocket to clean the wardrobe that production requires them to bring. Number 2, performers who must wear restrictive corsets or other binding costumes should be entitled to additional compensation. Rejected. Fittings. To avoid incrementally bargaining this amount up every negotiation, index the money break applicable to day performers whose contracts can include payment for fitting time to 1.5 times scale. Offered a one-time additional $100 to the money break, but rejected the indexed annual increase. We'll give you $100 one time. It's like, we're not, sorry guys, we don't have any raises this year, but we can do a pizza party for Christmas. Does that sound good to you? Looping retakes and added scenes. The parties have tentatively agreed to increases to the money breaks applicable to certain weekly performers whose contracts can include guarantees for looping, retakes, and added scenes, and the creation of such a provision for weekly performers working on theatrical films. Now, I don't really know what money breaks are specifically. I think that's like once you've worked a certain number of hours, like you get to a higher tier. I'm not sure what that is. I can see here it already looks like they've rejected a lot of this. Okay, background actors. Improve background actors' wages and working conditions. Number 1, background actors are the only category under our agreements who work under different terms on the East Coast than they do on the West Coast. SAG-AFTRA is seeking for all background actors to be treated equally. Rejected. That's horrible. In New York, background actors reporting before 6 a.m. should not be forced to wait in unsafe areas for public transportation. Offered additional reporting locations that are likely to be unsafe at early morning hours. So just completely not giving them at all what they're looking for. Like, hey, this bus station that we're waiting at, it has like, drug dealers around it. Can you give us another place to wait? It's like, no, but you can go wait at that corner too now, which also has drug dealers. Number 3, background actors who have to spend their own time styling their hair and or makeup should be compensated for 1.5 hours of work time. Offered $35 flat fee. Number 4, individuals required to do double duty, working as both stand-ins and background on the same day, should be compensated at 150% of the stand-in rate for the day. Rejected. Again, if you're working 2 jobs for them, you should be getting paid for working 2 jobs. They're only asking for 1.5 times. Honestly, I would say they should be asking for 200%. If they're working 2 jobs, they should be getting 200%. They're asking for 150, just rejected. No. We've already got you on the payroll, so you should be grateful for the opportunity to do more work for the same pay. Number 5, stand-ins who are required to rehearse or perform in place of a principal performer should be paid half of the principal performer rate in addition to their stand-in pay. Offered to withdraw for single camera shows if the AMPTP agreed to the multi-camera half-hour shows where it is a more common practice. And they offered $150 for stand-ins who have to rehearse or perform in place of a principal performer on multi-camera half-hour shows, rejected it for single camera shows. Number 6, background actors who work as the photographic double for a principal performer and are required to memorize and deliver scripted dialogue on camera should be paid a principal day player rate without residuals. Offered $150 to background actors who render services as photo doubles or deliver scripted dialogue on camera. It's kind of hard to tell without knowing more if this one is actually, like, I don't know what the day rate is, but $150, I don't know, it doesn't seem like enough, but it's hard to tell. Background actors should be paid for each episode they are employed in during a single day. Withdrew this proposal after the rejection in an attempt to resolve other items. And they rejected that. I feel like that's a fair ask. If you're working for multiple episodes, if your work is going to benefit them for multiple episodes, you should get paid for multiple episodes. But I can understand that one being one of the ones that's on the chopping block. You usually want to ask for far more than you're going to get. That way there's something on there to negotiate. I think this is a fair ask, but I can also understand this one just not getting accepted. Casting and self-taped auditions. Online casting platforms. Performers should not be required to pay for access to employment opportunities, nor provided preferential treatment in exchange for fees to a casting platform. Countered with an approach that will not stop the unlawful practice of requiring many performers to pay for access to jobs. Strict responsibility for their use of third-party casting platforms, and propose disingenuous solutions that allow for preferential treatment for performers who pay more with no enforcement mechanism. That's awful. I didn't even know about that. That is awful. They want actors. They want them for these roles. And they're just, that's horrible. Self-taped auditions. Proposed reasonable rules and expectations for self-taped auditions that alleviate some of the burden and costs of casting that have shifted to members. For example, Establish a minimum turnaround time for self-taped auditions for adults and minors, excluding weekends and holidays. Disclose if an offer is out or the role has already been cast at the time self-taped auditions are requested, and limit the number of pages for a first call. Tentatively agreed to some but not all necessary regulations, but only on the honor system, as they have refused any enforcement mechanism. Number 1. Tentatively agreed to reasonable turnaround times but refused to exclude weekends and holidays from the turnaround time calculation. Number 2. Counter rejected disclosing when an offer is out and required performers to contact production to ask if a role has already been cast. They will only endeavor to respond, so they're not going to. And countered with an unacceptable number of pages for the number of pages for a first call. Now, for pages, that's lines of dialogue that they are expected to memorize to show up for an audition. And there's only so much that you can memorize in a short time. I mean, I've learned a role in an afternoon, but that was like a single scene, and I was just like filling in because we had lost an actor and it was a minor role, so I just added in an additional role for an ensemble play. But it was like 3 lines of dialogue, so of course I was able to learn that in like 20 minutes. Number 4, tentatively agreed to limitations on technical requirements such as recording quality, cameras, lights, microphones, backgrounds, editing software, and uploading services. Well, this sounds good. Yeah. If they expect you to have full studio lighting in your studio apartment that you're sharing with 2 roommates, because, you know, you're trying to make it as an actor in Hollywood, yeah, you're not gonna have that quality. Number 5, tentatively agreed to limitations on slate requirements, including allowing vertical/portrait full body shots. Number 6, any tone, style, genre, period, creative vision, character description, accents, or other available information about the project and role should be provided to the performer at the time an audition is requested. This is rejected. So they want actors to audition without knowing what it is that they're looking for about the audition. I guess they're just hoping that they're gonna luck into an actor with the right je ne sais quoi. There are actors who don't know that that's what somebody's looking for, but can totally do it. This seems like a reasonable ask. Number 7, tentatively agreed that performers shall not be requested to audition in the nude or required to do a stunt in an audition. Okay, this seems like a good thing to agree to. Number 8, tentatively agreed on audition regulations for dancers, including that the music and choreography shall be provided, dancers shall not be asked to choreograph or improvise, space and time limitations, and it must be a solo dance. Tentatively agreed on the secure storage of self-taped auditions and written consent required at the time of use prior to making any tape public. Performers must be provided with an opportunity to audition in person or virtually in lieu of a self-tape upon request. Countered that production would do so on a first-come, first-served basis during a window of time, but this option would sunset at the expiration of the 3-year contract term. Virtual auditions. SAG-AFTRA proposed, and the parties have tentatively agreed, that all the relevant protections for self-taped auditions shall apply to virtual auditions. In addition, production shall provide additional privacy protections in virtual lobbies and maintain records of performers' call times and wait times for the calculation and enforcement of overtime pay. Geographic discrimination. Requested a discussion with relevant casting personnel regarding geographic discrimination in casting, whereby actors outside of New York and Los Angeles are offered lesser terms for the same role. Rejected. That sucks. Late payment. Increased liquidation damages due to the unacceptable trend of egregiously late payments. We brought this up before. Rejected. Though they admit that their companies consistently pay late, they have stated that they still will not pay on time, even with increased penalties. Can you imagine? You say, yeah, I know we're not getting out those residual checks to you on time. I know it's taken like 3 to 6 months. We're still going to keep doing it that way, though. Hair and makeup equity. To ensure equity for all members, including performers of color, all sets should have qualified hair and makeup professionals and equipment to handle a variety of hair textures and styles and skin tones. Tentatively committed to taking steps to ensure the appropriate qualified hair and makeup professionals are on set, but applied this only to principal performers and refused to mandate it, so that's nothing. That's toothless. That's just a memo saying, hey, you should think about hiring people who know how to work with black hair, but we're not going to do anything to enforce it. To ensure safety, members should be given the opportunity to consult with HMU professionals prior to starting work. tentatively agreed to provide consultations to principal performers but not to background actors, refused to make portions of this provision enforceable via arbitration. So they're saying, yeah, we'll do that. We just won't do anything about it that will actually be enforceable. Pension and health and retirement. Increase the pension and health contribution caps that have remained stagnant for more than 40 years, countered with insufficient increases to the caps. Background actors under 14 years old should not be discriminated against. They should receive pension contributions like everyone else. Maintain that background actors under 14 years old should not earn pension contributions in the West Coast zone because they are not serious about staying in the entertainment industry. What? That's absurd. First of all, I don't, honestly, hot take here, I don't think we should actually even have child actors anymore. That whole system just seems like it's being built up around abuse. But as long as we have child actors, they're actors doing a job, and whether you think they're serious about staying in the industry or not, they're doing a job for the industry, an industry in which you might go periods between jobs, and you still want to be able to work toward your retirement. And number 3, address the allocation of funding between the pension plan and retirement fund. The parties have tentatively agreed to suspend the current allocation methodology while they study alternatives. Don't know what that means other than we're looking into it. I see a couple of big fat rejecteds up here. Residuals P&H. Stop the producer practice of using benefit fund contribution caps as an excuse to keep residuals money that belongs to members rejected. Wow. Performance capture. Finally acknowledge that performance capture is in fact a SAG-AFTRA covered category of work. This highly skilled form of performance makes blockbuster projects like Avatar possible. Rejected. Oh my god. Like, can you imagine where Hollywood would be right now if we don't have people like Andy Serkis? This is just like spitting in their face. Like, what Andy Serkis does is absolutely acting. It's absolutely a performance that should absolutely be covered by SAG-AFTRA. Video games are doing this, and especially they'll like take the likeness of the character and do like a full mocap performance of them. I'm thinking of like the Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor. All of those characters, all the actors have their likenesses and they're doing mocap performances for that. I don't see how people could say that that's not work. That's not a covered category of work. It's acting. Stunt coordinators. Number 1, stunt coordinators should no longer be excluded from residuals such as network reruns, foreign television, and high-budget streaming. Offered to pay stunt coordinators residuals calculated as if they only worked one day, regardless of how long they actually worked on a picture or episode, but this would only take effect in year 2 of the new contract. SAG-AFTRA has tentatively agreed to accept the terms which match the 2019 Netflix agreement, but seeks to apply them in the first year of the contract. Number 2, stunt coordinators working under a rate that does not pay overtime or any premiums should not be paid less for television and streaming movies and series than for theatrical pictures. Proposed increases beyond their general wage increase offer for flat deal coordinators in television but refuse to equalize the rates. Require so-called flat deal stunt coordinators to receive either overtime or minimum rest between workdays to address abusively long hours on set, except for the bulletin withdrew after the rejection in an effort to achieve 1 and 2. Rejected flat deal stunt coordinator overtime and minimum rest tentatively agreed to send a bulletin to its companies advising them to release stunt coordinators when their work is done. Diversity. SAG-AFTRA proposed and the parties have tentatively agreed to a consultation process to reduce instances of inappropriate wiggings and paint downs. I don't know what that is. I feel like I should look that up. Yeah, Google's not of a help there. Translation. SAG-AFTRA proposed and the parties have tentatively agreed that actors should not be required to translate their own scripts without payment. Good they agreed on that. Audio descriptive services. Establish minimum terms for performers who narrate productions for blind and low vision viewers. Withdrew this proposal and will pursue it in other avenues. Rejected. Protection of the profession. Artificial intelligence. Establish a comprehensive set of provisions to protect human-created work and require informed consent and fair compensation when a digital replica is made of a performer, or when their voice, likeness, or performance will be substantially changed using AI. Failed to address many vital concerns, leaving principal performers and background actors vulnerable to having most of their work replaced by digital replicas. Yeah, that is going to be a big growing concern. There's like a clip from BoJack Horseman where Bojack gets like scanned in and they're like, oh yeah, this is just so that, you know, if you somehow fail to show up, we can just make the movie without you. And like that's gonna be kind of what they want to do. Like they want to hire a background actor for a day's work, and that day's work is being scanned into the computer, and then they just have that digital version of you to use for all productions forever without paying you another cent. And for voice acting, I mean, I've heard how good AI voice is getting now, and that is a real concern, especially when you look at things like what the Star Wars TV shows have been doing. James Earl Jones did not provide the voice of Darth Vader in Obi-Wan Kenobi. It was modeled after his voice, but it was in fact an AI-generated voice. Sorry, but I'm pretty sure there are other actors who can do a Darth Vader voice, and they should be paid to do that. When, you know, James Earl Jones, I think he's retired from voice acting now. So hire someone else. Give that to somebody else. Same with Luke Skywalker. They've got the whole, you know, digital Luke performance. They've got like a guy. They hired a guy who looks just like Mark Hamill that they used to CGI Mark Hamill's face on him, and then they use a CGI voice on it. Just hire that guy and have him do his own voice. Like, I didn't have a problem with Alden Ehrenreich playing Han Solo in the Han Solo movie. It's fine. We understand. It's totally fine to recast. Just, yeah. Oh my god, look at all that rejected. Look at all that rejected. Holy sh**. High budget SVOD. Improve residuals due for continued exhibition of pictures made for subscription-based streaming services. Offered progress on this proposal, but significant gaps remain. Series regulars options between seasons. Set reasonable timelines for the exercise of options that do not restrict series regulars from obtaining other employments during increasingly long hiatus periods imposed by employers between seasons. Agreed to improve timelines only for some performers and only for new series commencing in the second year of the contract. Guest stars. Performers hired by the week in recurring roles without start dates should be given at least a tentative window of work dates. Request a discussion of problematic hiring practices that result in performers being held off the market, unable to take other work. Counter makes progress but still contains problematic provisions. This is all very vague, but it sounds like they're not really meeting them there. And then here we have an entire section that's just rejected. So let's see what just completely got rejected. Apply union scale minimums, rest periods, and protections for minors to new media productions that are not high budget regardless of length. So they just want, this is just child exploitation. This is just child exploitation. Union scale minimums, rest periods, and protections for minors to new media productions. So new media being like streaming media or like YouTube shows or something like that. They're just like, oh no, we don't need child labor protections for those because, you know, they're not traditional. What? Kids are kids. Work is work. Number 2, require residuals for ongoing exhibition on advertiser-supported and subscription-based streaming services regardless of the budget or length of the picture. And reject it. Sorry, that was low budget. We don't have to pay you residuals for your work. I would argue that they would probably have more money to go around to pay residuals since they paid so little for the work, and it's still on the service, making money for the service. Number 3, calculate residuals for pictures made initially for new media and then exhibited on network or foreign television on the same basis as pictures made initially for television. Rejected. That sounds like a very reasonable ask. Number 4, increase the residual that applies when a traditional media picture is exhibited on a streaming platform that is free to the consumer. Rejected. Sorry guys, we're putting it up there for free, which means we don't have to pay you. That reminds me of when Apple Music launched. And Apple Music was free for the first 3 months when they launched. And because it was free, Apple's like, well, we're not going to pay any of our artists anything for those 3 months because we're not getting paid for it either. And it's like, you don't actually get to do that. Like Taylor Swift was like, I'm pulling all of my music off Apple Music unless you decide to actually pay the artists whose work you're sending to people. And Apple did back off because, you know, Taylor Swift is a big artist. But this right here, yeah, that one's bad. Residuals reporting. Require greater specificity in the information provided in connection with the payment of residuals. Tentatively agreed to a whittled down version of this proposal. I don't really, without having more details, I don't know much about this. But safety, I do not like seeing rejected under a safety section. Meal breaks. Increase the penalties for not providing meal breaks, which have not been updated since 1961. Rejected. What was the US dollar in 1961? Let's see, what's $1 in 1961 is worth about $10.20 today. So increase the penalties for not providing meal breaks, which have not been updated since 1961. Any financial penalties that are here are worth a tenth of what they used to be. And rest periods. Increase the penalties for failing to allow performers sufficient rest between work days. Rejected. Well, up here, it looks like some agreements. So, sexual harassment prevention. SAG-AFTRA proposed and the parties have tentatively agreed that producers will use good faith efforts to engage intimacy coordinators for scenes involving nudity or simulated sex, and upon request for other scenes that producers will provide information regarding discrimination and anti-harassment policies, including how to report violations, and that background actors will be given at least 48 hours notice of scenes involving nudity or simulated sex acts. The AMPTP has also tentatively agreed to review and revise their harassment prevention training programs with an eye toward handling scenes and situations of a triggering nature. Sounds good? Minors. SAG-AFTRA proposed and the parties have tentatively agreed that emancipated minors continue to receive education on set and that persons engaged in the supervision of teaching of minors be subject to a background check. Access to healthcare. SAG-AFTRA proposed and the parties have tentatively agreed to the funding of a travel benefit for access to reproductive health care and gender-affirming care for performers working away from home in states that restrict access to such care. Okay, this is a good one. That's good that they've agreed to this. That's definitely more and more needed these days. Warm-up spaces. SAG-AFTRA proposed and the parties have tentatively agreed to make reasonable efforts to provide set-adjacent warm-up spaces so that dancers don't cool down before getting to set. Animal monitoring. The parties have tentatively agreed to update the animal monitoring program for protection of both performers and animals when animals are on set. Additional important proposals. On-screen credits. Producers should submit full and complete credits to IMDb and assist performers in correcting any inaccurate credits. The AMPTP tentatively agreed to assist performers in correcting credits, but would not agree to provide full and complete credits to IMDb. The union withdrew the proposal to include the union logo in the end titles of their production. So they had a proposal to have union logos in production, but withdrew that one. Getting credited for your work is really important. If you want future work in Hollywood, being able to point to your CV, like if it's all on IMDb, it's a really quick one. People can just look up your name and look and see what you've done. So that's very important that all be there. And it looks like they don't actually care to submit it. And like producers have a list of everybody that's working on a project, because they have to pay them. So if they know it, they should be able to just submit that to IMDb. Come on. Insurance. Parties have tentatively agreed that the accidental death and dismemberment insurance policy is applicable when principal performers and background actors travel be the same amount as required by the DGA agreement. Off-camera stunt performers. SAG-AFTRA has withdrawn a proposal to require residuals for off-camera stunt performers. It was rejected. Term. The parties have tentatively agreed to a 3-year term. Non-disclosure agreements. SAG-AFTRA has withdrawn the proposal to protect against egregious provisions in non-disclosure agreements. Promotional trailers. SAG-AFTRA has withdrawn the proposal for scale minimums to apply to trailers in new media, but continues to ask for transparency and accuracy in the reporting of work on trailers. These were both rejected or withdrawn. And here we are. All of the ones that are in italics have been withdrawn. So SAG-AFTRA has withdrawn the proposal that the AMPTP provide the union with information necessary to determine where its members are earning their compensation. Reporting. SAG-AFTRA proposed and the parties have reached a tentative agreement that the producers report on members earning up to $1 million per picture. Electronic reporting. SAG-AFTRA has withdrawn a proposal to require that documents be provided in electronic format rather than requiring in-person review of paper documents. Rejected, but notably requested the option to provide documents electronically in one of their proposals in circumstances where it benefited them. Arbitration. SAG-AFTRA has proposed replacing deceased arbitrators with living ones. Countered with each party adding an arbitrator to each of the New York and Los Angeles panels, the parties are discussing the respective additions. Reuse of clips in new media. In connection with progress in other areas, SAG-AFTRA has withdrawn this proposal requiring consent and payment for use of clips in new media. SAG-AFTRA has withdrawn proposed payment for performers when producers elect not to release a production, thereby depriving performers of potential residuals. So this sounds like, say, if you are in Batgirl and then Batgirl never comes out. But they withdrew it, so We'll see. And then the final thing that was withdrawn, theatrical re-release payment. SAG-AFTRA has withdrawn a proposal for a new payment to performers when a theatrical film is re-released in theaters. So it really sounds like Hollywood is not looking to play ball. There's very little in all of that they were actually willing to work with them on. This strike's gonna go for a while. I believe the execs when they say they want to wait until the writers start losing their houses. And hopefully, you know, public opinion can turn enough and there can be enough public pressure that they come back to the table earlier, but I think we're in for a long and ugly fight, and I am fully behind the workers. And, you know, I will take this opportunity again, as always, to say in particular, f you, David Zaslav. You're kind of one of the worst parts of all of this. Even if you didn't come up by name in this one, yeah, you too. Hey, thanks for watching. I'm trying to get my channel monetized, so your view means a lot. Don't forget to toss me a like and subscribe and ring the bell. I stream these reviews every Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific, so catch me live and join in on the convo. You can find all my socials in the description below, and thank you to all my patrons with a special shout out to Piftle Cakes. Your support means the world. Catch you next time.